Entity framework, our tools.
Netforty suite.
Countdown commencing. T-minus 2 minutes.
Jeremy Lickness.
Shiro Jan.
Grace Lanston.
Martha Vickers.
.NET data. T-minus 1 minute. Thirty seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. We are go for .NET Data Community Stand-Up.
Hi, we're back again with another .NET Data Community Stand-Up. This one is becoming a bit of a tradition every year. We have Michael Staib. Did I say that right? Probably not. Right. Coming in and Michael Staib coming in and talking about GraphQL and hot chocolate, all of that good chili cream stuff that works with Entity Framework, building applications with it, and that's basically what we're going to do. Not much to say state of the unicorn wise, so we're just going to jump straight into that. But before, let me first welcome. Now, you introduce yourself, because if I say it first, I will get it wrong. So we have a new team member on the .NET Data Access Entity Framework team at Microsoft.
Hey, my name is Cincura, and I'm, as was said, the latest member of the EF Core team. And some people might know me from my work on Firebird providers for AD.NET, EF6, and obviously EF Core.
Yep. So we've known Yishi for quite some time now, and because of his work on Firebird stuff and everything, he's been in the community a bit like Shy with the Postgres stuff earlier, actually. But he's been with Microsoft for a couple of years now, right? And just recently made a transfer over to this team, partly because I'm no longer a manager, which means that I'm also an engineer on the team now. So 3 engineers. Anyway, so we're a new host for the show, which is great. And let's now jump straight into GraphQL stuff. Michael.
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, today I brought lots of new stuff. Actually,
Awesome.
a lot of stuff that we built on Aspire. So everything we're gonna look today at is really breaking previews, including Aspire.
That's the way we like it.
That's the way we like it. Yep.
Yeah, but it's all hopefully coming out in the summer. That is
Okay.
At the moment the general direction and the official announcement for Aspire. So somewhere in summer.
Right.
More we cannot say.
Michael,
Yes.
do you want to say a couple words on what on Aspire and what it is,
Yes.
just for our users the viewers who don't know about it?
Yeah.
Let me know if you want me to add your screen, Michael.
Yes, you can add my screen.
Okay,
And
there we go.
there's nothing useful yet, but typically when we talk about Aspire, it's for it's for setups like this where you have microservices, and Aspire really simplifies the inner loop that developers have when they build such distributed applications. That's my shortest take on it. There are multiple takes possible on Aspire, actually. And I found that explaining what Aspire is really difficult.
Yeah.
So I think at the beginning, the community was like, is it replacing Terraform? Is it some kind of Microsoft Terraform? And
I had the same trouble talking to people. Just getting a one-line definition of Aspire is not easy, and it's true. It's very important that this is not a new way for production management of your microservices in general. So you're not using this, it doesn't replace Docker Compose, Terraform, or things like this, but it's really, really, really nice, especially when you're developing. So in the local development kind of thing, it also adds, sorry, I'm butting in. I'm just adding a few.
No, go.
It also adds, it's a very opinionated kind of stack. So, usually, you get components and you choose and you configure what you want to do. And Aspire kind of goes, I think that's a really positive thing, goes in a different direction of saying, we're just going to be opinionated and we're going to give you like a default thing where everything kind of just works really nicely and correctly. So a good example of this is everything that you're using in Aspire is going to have, telemetry working out of the box. You don't have to figure out how to get, metrics and telemetry out of your your database connector. You're going to have resiliency. There are various features that are kind of out of the box for you. But yeah, now I'm going to shut up because this is Michael's show.
Yeah, that is exactly true. You have like telemetry in your .NET solution. Awesome. Yeah, distributed telemetry and stuff. So this is actually our dashboard, but it interacts with the Aspire dashboards that we have. We're going to look at that. But you have similar integration, like open telemetry events. David Fowler often says they are basically turning the lights on in .NET. And that, I think, is a very good explanation of all the telemetry work that is happening. But that's also the good thing in Aspire. There's nothing proprietary in it. Like it's building on things like open telemetry. That means that is an open standard that is not even focused on .NET. You can have a JavaScript, a Node server that has open telemetry, or a Java server that has open telemetry. So essentially, a solution for tracing that works across the boundaries. And
there's the tracing part, and then there's the metrics part, right? There's those two aspects of open telemetry just because we're on it. So what you're seeing here is tracing. We're looking at a single request and seeing how it breaks down into sub things that are happening to service that request and how long they're taking. That's absolutely awesome. If you haven't turned on tracing for your apps, please do that. This is really, really amazing. But then there's also the other aspect, which is metrics, which is just getting aggregate numbers basically on what the hell is going on in your application, like how many commands are being executed per second, how much memory is being taken, and then plotting all that on a nice dashboard that's just there by default. That's like the stuff that Aspire kind of gives you. It's super cool.
Exactly. And then like Aspire is not only about tracing, it's also about making it much more easy to build like cloud native applications that maybe consist out of a couple of components, and basically wiring them up so that you can just F5 debug into them, which was a challenge in the past. And all this built on open standards. And like one thing I like about Aspire a lot is that you can choose what you want to go into, and we will see that. So you could go just for the service defaults, which are around resiliency in your services, but you can also go for the orchestrator and things like that. So the question is, what does this have all to do with GraphQL? And we're gonna explore that. And so what we did in the past is basically build a demo application. We took an ugly duckling, I would say. called eShop.
Yeah, let's not. There's some work that's needed there.
No, but we took the very old one, like with all the CQS and DDD stuff in, so the overcomplicated things, because we wanted to see like what people are doing. Like we wanted to have the very easy thing where you have GraphQL on top of entity framework, but we also wanted to make things easier for people that want to do layered architectures and want to have lots of layers between entity framework and their actual service layers. So we wanted to have the full variety, and you have it here. We polished it a bit because like eShop is quite old. I didn't know it even. I only knew it because like I was at a conference in Sydney, and David Fowler had a workshop there. So I decided I'm just crashing in there, and they were building that on the eShop, and that's why I thought that's actually
there's
good.
There continues to be a lot of discussion internally about what we should really show in eShop and how we should show it and what patterns it should follow, and how specifically from a data perspective around DDD. I don't think the feeling on the team is right now that what's in eShop shows the best kind of practices for really doing DDD, at least with EF. So that's on our plate to go look at as well. But we've got lots of other things to do.
Yes. I was crying to Shay on Twitter. But we fixed most of the things. Okay. So these kinds of applications, and I'm just starting it now, just to give you a bit an impression what actually the Aspire stuff does. So we have here an app host. So this app host is kind of our orchestrator, brings all these things together. I will not look into it yet. I'm going to show it in a second, and we're just going to start it. And the cool thing when we start this thing here, it actually composes now a lot of components and then starts up. Takes a bit longer because I cleaned my repository. That's to actually create everything, but it's now there. And it's not a single project that I actually started. Just put it in. Window opened on the other side. Actually, it started this thing here, and you can see there are also some errors on here. There's also a ton of things that are listed that belong to my application, like there are containers for an event bus. There's a Postgres server, there's pgadmin, there's Redis, and there are lots of components that belong actually to my application. And I can see where all of these are running, right? I have a lot of routes here where I can go and then really look what they happen. They also happen or have all these tracing. Like I can actually look at what is going on here. Like this is the log, and you can see there are new things coming in from the order processor and stuff like that. So there are things that are ongoing here. But I also have like this tracing view. Like I could see what's actually happening here. Go into the order processor, for instance, and have a look. And at this point, we are just doing something with the database. If I would do a web request with any of these, I will get a more complex trace.
So this is the open telemetry tracing stuff that we mentioned just before. And one thing I'm just going to add is that this dashboard that you're seeing, that's something that you get for free. That's the main point here, right? Like you didn't have to code this up and link everything together and make sure it runs together, which would be quite a lot of work, right, to get started. That's exactly the thing with Aspire. You basically have it just starts up all those containers for you because you've described to Aspire how that works, and it also gives you this sort of very free dashboard that gives you a lot of power and information without doing any work for it, which is always a good thing.
Yes, it's really amazing. So it's basically F5, and this thing is there, and I didn't even have to do anything. I just did a .NET new Aspire, and then it creates me this app host. So there are two Aspire projects that belong to each Aspire setup. It's the service defaults and basically the app host, which orchestrates everything. And if you then just F5, you get like this amazing tracing. This helps a lot with debugging these applications. It basically really shows you where problems might lie. Okay. I don't know why this one is dead.
About the metrics one, does that show anything useful at this point?
Yeah, just give me a second. File not found. Oh, nice.
Demo time.
Now I know what it is. Luckily.
And it's my fault too. I saw it's the EF core provider for Postgres.
Yeah.
So let's quick. Okay, but this is good. Like this is also the first thing I could go here. Like this just died, and you still get the logs like these guys. That is basically your console. You can see that there's something missing. I don't know yet what.
While you think about it, I mean, again, I don't know how many of the spectators here have done a thing like this, like basically do a distributed application that's made up of multiple containers, right? And then one of the challenges is one of them doesn't work, and now you have to figure out, why doesn't it work, and where are the logs, and which container is it, and all that kind of thing. That I'm serious. Like you sometimes have to do this. It's really, really, really hard. And one of the nice things that you get here is basically your list of containers with a simple link in the UI that tells you, this one is for the logs, and you click on it and you see the exception, the thing that you just saw. So actually, while I'm sure Michael didn't really plan to have this error in the demo, I think this is actually a super nice demo of how nice it is to have like your dashboard just there for you. So again, I'm a big fan.
Yes, I'm also a big fan, and let's check out. I'm just because like the thing I did at Git stash is before I did the demo, literally 20 minutes before the show started, I had it finished. And then I basically stashed what I had in my work stash, so I could show a couple of things and redo them with you guys. But something didn't work out, but that doesn't matter. Okay, so let's go into the setup. So this is nice. We have all the information in Aspire, but how does this work? So the thing is that we have this app host. And I talked about that a bit. That is this project. And this project actually has a program CS and also a very familiar setup. Like you have here a builder kind of API. That is our .NET thing, I have to say. You have it in Maui. You have it in any kind of project nowadays. And with this builder, we can basically define our dependencies for things. Like I could say, okay, for my project, for my distributed application, I actually need something like a Redis. And I don't have to specify where this Redis lives. And I might have a very specific configuration on my production environment, maybe done with something like Terraform or Pulumi. But here on my dev box, I just say, I need a Redis. And then what Aspire does is basically issue me this Redis automatically on Docker. So I still have Docker, so it's not that this is happening somewhere in a proprietary product. It's really like the standard utilities that we use here, like Docker on your local dev box, where we now just issue basically this container. Same goes here for Postgres. So I'm using here Postgres, and I'm using Postgres in a specific version. So I have a specific image that I want to use here. So I have these vectors. And I also have here a RabbitMQ for messaging. These are basically my dependencies that I'm not working on. So this is just the stuff I need that my projects work. I also declared here a couple of databases that I want on my Postgres. That's also good. Like I can just say, okay, I need a database, catalog DB, identity DB, and please issue me that. So
when
then,
you call When you call add database there, what's that actually doing?
So it's basically creating a database, I would say.
And it also gives you manages the connection string to it in an automated way.
That's
right. That's like one of the, later if something needs the catalog DB, some microservice, you don't need to mess around with, manually with connection strings. You have a wrapper for that concept of what a database is, and it's managed for you.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's not doing any EF core migration works, right? It's just making sure this database is there on this Postgres. And then you can see I always have these, I capture these instances here from the builder. And I'm using that here to create the database. And then I capture here the database. And now comes really the magic part for the configuration is when I say I have an identity server, for instance, here, or I have my catalog API, which is here. This is my catalog API. I basically can say I need a reference to that database here. And I'm just passing this variable on as a reference to my service. And then all the configuration happens underneath. So I don't have to worry about connection strings. This will just happen. I don't even know where this container is issued, but this is all then configured. The same goes like if one service needs a reference to the other service. For instance, the basket service might need a reference to the catalog API. I can just also reference that here. In this case, I want an HTTP reference to this microservice here. And all these things are then automatically configured, and it's compile time safe. So I have done that really at build time. One important thing is here, like how do I reference these projects? It's basically standard references that you do with project references. You can see these are actually referenced here, basket API, catalog API. And what Aspire does, it generates these stub types here. And that's just to have not a magic string, but a strong compilable reference to that project, to reference to this project here. And that's really cool because that makes the setup really clean and really .NET-y, right? So let's see. The second thing like in our setup here is that these downstream services are all GraphQL services. So the catalog service is really one GraphQL service. And like we have done here a standard GraphQL setup. And in this case, we have here our, not this guy, we have here our query types, like these operations, where I can fetch things from this downstream service, right? So let's quickly restart that and hope just the bug that I had is gone. No, but we work around that. So we have here the basket API. That, as I said, is a microservice. In this case, it's a GraphQL subgraph, we call that, because it's part of a whole, right? And these microservices are actually often very complicated because you need to know where you get certain stuff, right? In this instance, I can go here to our microservice, and you can see this microservice actually just exposes one field. That is called a viewer, and the viewer has a basket. So basically, that is the currently signed in user, and this currently signed in user can have a basket in our eShop, right? We also have here a mutation to put things in the basket, to change the quantity, to clear the basket, or to remove something from the basket. So the typical things that I need to manage my basket instance here. I have other microservices, like for instance, the ordering. Let's go in there. GraphQL. It's also a GraphQL API in this case. And we have here again, like lots of types there. You can see this also has a viewer, is that right? Yes. has also a viewer, but this viewer has the orders that the user just did, right? All the orders that you did. We can also access an order directly by ID, or we can create, cancel an order, and do some other actions on it. So this is basically the interactions I can have between my microservices. So let's have a look at the catalog API, because it would be nice if we get that working. And now I really have to look at the issue that we have. System file not found. It's a Postgres stuff, so it might be Shay's fault.
It always is.
Because the extension there is a reference missing. Did I do anything here? Let's quickly look it up. It'd be a shame if that falls apart. So we have the Aspire stuff in there, some Azure AI, because you need that nowadays.
Of course. What's an application without AI? Do those even exist still?
So how are you bringing in the reference there? It's just a package reference to Postgres there. It's package reference through Aspire. Is that maybe not bringing in the dependencies correctly? Or I mean, I'm just
so
guessing.
I think. Let me click quickly because I switched to Aspire 4, and they split a bit the Postgres stuff out. So I also had in the ordering API, did we have there this new Aspire? Not there. Just a second. There was this new kind of package where they split out the data reference. I'm gonna find it in a second. Postgres tools, no. Let's quickly look at here. That is the packages.
I'll maybe use this time also to say another thing, because in any case we're working through it. So eShop in general, of course, just so that people understand, eShop is not a GraphQL thing originally. It's a sample sort of thing by Microsoft that basically aims to show best practices of how a cloud native kind of microservices based application looks like, right? So it's supposed to be like a shop, and you can see that you have the various services. You already saw this, right? There's one service for the basket and another one for the order API and another one for the catalog, like a very classical sort of microservice thing where each microservice is in its own container and all that kind of stuff. Even the databases are separated there, right? So you've got, as is frequently what you want to do with microservices-based kind of application, you've got each microservice has its own database, basically, right? And there's various questions if you want actual database instances per container, or if it's okay for them to live in the same container. There's various questions around this, but here's the point. What I like about what Michael is doing here specifically is that I think that's one of the best places to show where GraphQL really shines, right? When you have all microservices kind of spread out, then if you're not using GraphQL, if it's just like normal REST services, like the classical kind of thing, then basically you're talking to each microservice, via its own REST API, and you have to figure out the schema, and you have to do all that kind of stuff. And if you need, for example, to do a thing that encompasses multiple microservices, then it's up to you to do a call to one microservice and a call to another microservice, right? So you're basically directly in touch with the microservices themselves. And the really nice kind of selling point for me that GraphQL gives us here is it gives you a layer in front of those microservices, and it federates them. That's sometimes a word that's used in this context. It kind of puts all of this complexity behind a single schema. So now your front end, right, as let's say you're on the client side in a web application or a mobile application, all you see is a single GraphQL schema, and it has inside it catalog items and orders and all that kind of stuff. And behind the scenes, all that gets mapped to different microservices, but that now becomes an internal implementation concern on the server side. Whereas on the client side, you don't have to care about that stuff, and you don't have to know that your catalog microservice is here and your orders is there. It's just one federated schema in GraphQL that you can now use very, very seamlessly. And that's something that I find very, very compelling in GraphQL, and that's why I think this specific demo is the right way to kind of try to sell GraphQL in that sense, right? That's the kind of cool thing about it.
Yeah, I hope. So I wanted in actually my.
I'm not even trying to make up time, like to just time here. I actually did want to say those things as well, but
and you should be able to see that actually, and let's see that. But it is refusing to work with me here. Although it's stubborn. It's very interesting that this doesn't work in this service, but in all the others. It's a typical. Okay, let's skip that out, and I still can make the point. Okay, so I'm just getting rid here. So what we have here actually is also a gateway, and that is actually what brings these microservices together. And that is a Fusion gateway. It's based on the composite schema specification that we are building at the GraphQL Foundation with other vendors like Apollo and IBM and all the others that are in the GraphQL ecosystem. And we have here like several APIs that are the APIs that you can see here, like ordering API, basket API, catalog API. And we are bringing them together in this gateway here to basically say, these are my microservices, compose me essentially a monolithic way to access these things. Because what we want to do in a microservice architecture is often we want to develop in isolation. We want to develop in separate teams on these microservices. But then if we want to access these services, we kind of want to have a nice unified layer. So I'm kicking out here actually a couple of APIs, and I'm just doing that. And then I can kind of, it always takes a bit to stop because there are a couple of components involved. By the way, Aspire feels like a lot faster now in startup times since it arrived in preview 4. So now this is coming up. By the way, this red bubble here often comes up when there are when it tries to connect to the event bus and it's not yet ready. It retries then, and this is okay. So what I'm going to now is actually our gateway. So I'm going here to the GraphQL route. Actually, let's get rid of that. And let's create a new tab here. And let's have a look at the schema. Because like the schema that we see here is actually now composed from multiple graphs. You can see I have here an order. That order is actually coming from the order service. We also have the viewer type. And the viewer type is actually distributed across services. Like the viewer on the basket service just had the basket. But now the viewer on the order service had also the orders of this specific viewers. So this is actually like composed into a single endpoint here where I can access these things. And if I query now one thing, like for instance, we go here for the viewer, and actually I have to sign in. So quickly go over here. And we want to have, let's take that, duplicate. Okay. Okay, we have a token here. I can actually re-sign in. So this is now the identity server. I can sign in. It's super secure because it tells me the password down here. So we can just pass that in. Then we get a token in Banana K-pop, and then we can actually query this endpoint. And I could just go here to the basket of my current user. Could also just check who am I. For instance, what's my name? Run that, and then you can see here Alice is my name. Actually, let me just switch off this part here. We do that. So this is actually what the user would get, right? In a non-debug way. That is Alice. And we don't know where this actually comes from. We also could go for the basket. The basket comes from another service, actually. If I have a basket, I don't know if there is at the moment a basket for what I want to buy. But I could run that. You can see there is no basket at the moment. I'm not shopping. I could add something in a minute to it. But this actually comes from several graphs. So what I can do here is actually look at the query plan, what is happening. It was actually this flag. Ooh. And then it sends me the query plan. And at the moment, it's a very simple query plan. It goes here in parallel, goes to the basket API and also to the identity API, and then composes from that as this result. So I can not only just, it sticks these things together, but it really integrates them and then has a query plan to find the most effective way to get the data from all your microservices and give them to the user that builds actually the front end, right?
For me, this is again super compelling. We talked about this just before, but it's kind of like the advantages of having a monolith in terms of your client. Yeah. Like your client looks at the server and sees a monolith, right? They see just a single GraphQL schema. And in fact, behind the scenes, you do have a microservices with all the advantages, as Michael was saying, of having different teams and deploying the microservices like completely in isolation from one another and not having those things being connected. And it's amazing for me that you can even change things up. For example, you can move something around like in behind the scenes and from one microservice to another, a capability, and do refactoring, and your GraphQL schema that you expose, like the fusion whatever or the federated schema, I don't know which term is the correct one nowadays. I'm not super up to date on GraphQL, but the view basically that you present to your clients remains completely the same. And this sort of split between what the client sees and how how that actually maps to microservice behind the scenes or something else. It doesn't necessarily have to only be microservices. That is, I think, super compelling for a microservices-based architecture.
Yes, so, yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to say that we had the typical question on the chat about how is OData different from GraphQL? Like, when should I use one or the other? So I've referred them to our previous stand-up. We had a previous stand-up where we talked about this, but this that you're doing here is fundamentally different, at least from traditional OData. And actually, there's a kind of underpinning to the philosophy here that Shai mentioned a bit as well, which is here we're defining exactly what data we want to be shown in the UI or returned from the service, right? We are being very conscious about saying this is exactly what the client wants, right? OData leads you down more of a path where you say, I've got a database schema or I've got some other source of data. Generate me a whole load of APIs that basically reflect that, which is super easy to do, and then gives you basically access to your entire database in a way that your database is formed and not in a way that it crosses over. Now, I know there's some plans to allow OData to do some more things around that, but at the moment, GraphQL is a much better choice, I would say, for doing this kind of microservices work than OData. It's going to take a lot of that out of it, whereas if you use OData, it's essentially very similar to just using a database directly and then building it what you need on top of it. GraphQL gets you further. And also kind of related to this, like I'm currently working on a presentation for the Cosmos DB conference that's coming up in about a month here, and on that, I have a demo where I'm actually changing out a relational database to a Cosmos store behind a API, and the API doesn't change at all, right? And I'm not using GraphQL, so I'm writing that stuff. But if I were using GraphQL, those replugging those things would be a lot cleaner and simpler in there. And so this really ties into the way people are creating like minimal APIs, web APIs, and user interfaces now, I think, right?
Yeah, there's also, by the way, a product called the Azure Data API Builder. It's actually built on top of Hot Chocolate, and but a Microsoft product, and you can put it over Cosmos DB, and you instantly have an API in GraphQL, which you could also use in Aspire then with our gateway to compose like microservices from it. Possibilities.
Possibility. But I think, but does I don't know because I haven't seen this, but does that then you essentially then expose what your Cosmos database looks like directly, right? It's not, you're not defining the specific front end. This is what my front end needs, and being very explicit about that, which I think is something that it's very useful to do when you're considering your data access through these things like this.
Kind of. For Cosmos DB, you basically define a GraphQL schema, and then they create a Cosmos DB that matches, because like
I see. Okay.
A Cosmos DB doesn't have a schema like this, so they take the GraphQL schema, make a GraphQL server out of it, and then store the data like you defined in GraphQL.
It's an interesting take on a code-first kind of approach, but use GraphQL as your sort of representation.
Yes.
Like your old EDMX is now GraphQL in a sense, right?
Yeah. It's a complete opposite of the DDD stuff we're doing here.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
But like for me, it's whatever you feel happy with.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The only reason I bring some of this stuff up is that historically, doing something that automatically just exposes what's in your database has been a pretty bad practice that people have done poorly in the past, both from security and a performance perspective. And so it's worth calling out. In modern times, you probably are not going to, at least in the long run, just return the shape of your database. Like, even if you start off that way, things will evolve, and having a separation, an intentional separation between them, I feel like is a pit of success. But clearly, if you're writing a line of business application and you can get it up and done in half a day and be moving on to the next thing, and you don't care about any of that stuff, then go for it, because like you say, pragmatically, just do what you need to get your job done, right?
Yeah, I think my rationale to it is how long does your application live?
Yeah.
If it's an application that lives maybe a year or so, there are these
how
kinds of applications.
Do you know? Anyway, let's get back to the GraphQL.
Yeah. But okay, so we have like a composed GraphQL server. Not very impressive, because the most impressive part is broken. But let's try to work around that. So how do I actually create here something and integrate it as a microservice? And that is like this inner loop that really is a driving force behind Aspire, but also like around the integration that we have built for Aspire. So I can basically let's stop it quickly. Okay, I can basically go and create a new project here, and I can say I want to build a GraphQL server, and then we could say eShop. And let's call it some basket stuff. I don't know, basket stuff. It's just a microservice that will extend maybe something around the basket, bring additional context to the basket. And I know this actually uses older stuff. So we just kick that out, because this has central package management on.
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise we get into trouble.
Indeed.
It will be something. So the thing with the catalog server, it will be something around that. But that is like a GraphQL server. Now we could start it. And at the moment, it has here a books API. But how do we get it in this Aspire setup, right? The first thing we do, and that's that I said, we have these components in Aspire. One is the service defaults, this guy here. And like for the GraphQL stuff, we also have here a shared folder to have some shared logic. We can just add that. And then in our configuration, to have these service defaults work, we kind of just add them. So builder.add service defaults. And that adds a ton of stuff, like how health checks can be managed and things like that. And also like resilience, like we can look into that. The cool thing in Aspire, they generate that as code, because these defaults, like for instance, that you have OpenTelemetry turned on, that the service discovery works. Service discovery is essentially helps the HTTP clients to know where which service is. And there are tons of other stuff. These things are sensible that you update them over time. That's why Aspire provides them as a code template.
And this is that aspect that we were also discussing previously of Aspire being opinionated, right? It basically says that the default for you, what you want, is this sort of default experience where you have health checks and you've got the resiliency and you've got the telemetry. And this is not something like in a traditional app. You have to go and do each one of these aspects yourself and configure them. And one of the points of Aspire is that you don't need to do that. You're a cloud native microservices application. That means that these things like a health check is absolutely necessary for any application. Telemetry is absolutely necessary for every application. So we should not be forcing each and every developer to do this every time again and again. Therefore, Aspire is doing this for you. So it's opinionated. It doesn't mean that you can't tweak it or that you can't turn it off. If for any reason you've decided you don't want it, I'm not sure why, but let's say you do, then that is something you can do. But the default thing is opinionated, and you do get those things out of the box. And that's part of the Aspire philosophy.
Exactly.
And also, it's worth mentioning that all the defaults like fit together, because you could do the same stuff yourself, but you would spend some time making sure that everything fits together nicely, like the health checks and the dashboards and everything. And now you have it like pre-configured, pre-packaged, and you can tweak it to some extent, because if you tweak it too much, something's going to break. You can, but obviously something's going to break. But if you tweak it just a little, then everything keeps working. The dashboard and everything is just there and working for you.
Yeah,
I think there's an element here that goes into what was being discussed a little bit in the chat about whether or not it makes sense to have an overall dashboard and telemetry that everything gets wired up, because then you don't necessarily know everything that you're doing because you haven't done it explicitly. And what Aspire is doing here is following this continued trend that we have, where we say, okay, if you want to create something complicated, so like in an EF Core case, that might be like the full schema for a database, right? It's a complicated thing to create from a set of code. Aspire, complicated to create and set up and configure all of the different services and make sure everything fits together, like we were just talking about. It's totally reasonable then for the software that you're using to create a set of sensible defaults, which is what is happening here, a set of things that work together. And I don't believe that prevents people from learning what's happening. Now, you can always use it as a crutch and not bother to learn or not need to learn. In fact, not bothering is the wrong word, because if you don't need to learn how to tweak a little particular thing, then that's great. Don't learn about that. Learn about the thing that you do need to tweak and gradually increase your knowledge of what's going on under the covers. So use it as a good set of defaults to start with. And this is what ASP.NET Core has been doing for quite a long time. EF has been doing for a long time. Aspire is fitting into that. So yeah, treat it as something that lets you learn and lets you understand what's going on, and then manipulate and change the things you need without having to understand everything up front, which for most people is really impossible when you're getting started on something like this.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the important point, that you can start with little knowledge and have everything configured and done correctly. And then once you gain knowledge, or once you gain experience with, I don't know, health checks or databases, you can start changing some connection string parameters or whatever you need. And you can go a little bit deeper, and you don't have to do it upfront. So you can start really easily. And if it's like your side project and you want to have a nice dashboard and everything, you have it. and you don't care what the defaults are because you are happy with it. It's for your like side project or something. But if it's your line of business application you are working on every day, then you can start again with the same stuff, but slowly over next, I don't know, couple of months, couple of years, start tweaking this one and learn how it works, and maybe switch from, I don't know, Grafana to something else if you say, oh, I need something else because that's better fit for me.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, let's get back to Michael.
Okay, so there is like this map defaults endpoint, what I put also in, and that actually has these health and life checks in there. What's the difference? Like healthy is everything is good. Alive is okay, at least we can ping it. So we have these two differences, and Aspire will pick up on them. So we mapped them in there. They were kind of in the defaults. So this is basically the two things I put in here: add service defaults and map default endpoints, and then everything works. So now I have a GraphQL server in here that doesn't even fit in our setup. It has a books endpoint. We're going to take it for now and gonna integrate it into our microservice setup. So in order to do that, we reference it here. So basket stuff, I can reference that here. And now I can create basically here a project reference like this here. Stuff, let's call it like this. And that is equals the builder. And then I can say add a project to the Aspire setup. And like the code generator already kicked in. So we have here under projects, our stuff project somewhere there. And that is good. Now it's integrated, but we also have to give it a name. And let's call it the stuff API. Okay. So this is in. So in order to have that integrated into our gateway setup, we just say we want to have another subgraph, and we want to have the stuff API in here. And that's all. In the moment I compile now, the gateway is composed essentially. Wait quickly for it. Yeah, you can see here it's composed. The stuff API is, now I know what the bug is actually, because I have this typo here. And that is an older version of hot chocolate that's already fixed. And that, I think is the problem.
Plot thickens.
You know, it's where the clues come out, isn't it? Suddenly you see a typo and you're like, oh, now I know.
But we can live with that. Let's.
Yeah.
Okay, that's actually fixed. But okay, so this is compiled now, and that means our gateway is already ready. So if I run that, you will see that everything is integrated. So one important aspect here, we compose at build time. Yeah. So this is just because our template has the same port as some other project here. So we quickly go into our launch setting and give it a new, actually, let me steal that from here. Properties. So this goes here. Then we give it a port, maybe 9. Doesn't matter really. And also one more thing. This is actually a bug in this build because I saw that it's on the older build now. So we have to copy this string into the subgraph config down here. That is actually fixed in the newest preview of Hot Chocolate. But now we can just start it. So we started. It will work. Thank you. Sometimes, right? Okay, now it starts. We can go to our dashboard. So this is all up. And my catalog API is fixed.
Whoa.
Nice.
While you were talking, I was...
Yay.
Anyway, so we integrated this basket API here with this books endpoint. I could go to that, right? GraphQL, and then you can see this has actually basket API, basket stuff API there.
API, right.
Come on, GraphQL. So we go here, and schema with the book here, very simple. And when we go now to our gateway, this is this guy here. So
yeah, this is where this thing.
Distributed applications, but you actually don't have to care about all these downstream services, because we always have like here our gateway. That's where you go, and that's where you have the book API. We just created it, integrated. We could also query that now here in actually, because like here we are signed in and have the query plan already open, so I can go for the book as well. That is not really the impressive part yet, but let's do that. We run that. And it does it. Why is it taking so long? It doesn't matter. But it comes back. You can see it has now from 3 APIs in parallel. There's actually something wrong there, but I'm more interested in the query plan here. That works. And that's how easy you have the feedback loop to get something in here. The good thing about this compile time integration is the moment I do something wrong here, like I change something in my schema that maybe has a problem with other schemas, because everything is so tightly integrated, we want to have compile time security about I'm doing something wrong here. Like for instance, I could go to the shipping API and change a couple of types here. Let's try that out actually. Like this guy is actually of the type ID. Maybe I change that to become an integer. And then we can recompile that. And it composes, which is unfortunate. Let's do some more damage. At some point. Okay, that's the curse of the preview and also the wrong preview. Actually, what you get is errors here right in your window. You can click on it, and then you get to the right piece of code in C#, which you actually broke, which broke the overall composition. That means the dependencies with your other microservices, and these microservices might not even be like in this project, in this Aspire project, because we can integrate with the overall cloud, like with the whole company. Let's think about like your Aspire project is for your team, and you have the microservices of your team in there. And now you're compiling, but we are compiling also against the other teams to which you don't even have a reference, but we have this overall reference in Banana Cake Pop, and we compile against that, right? Like
That's
we
very
have
cool.
this overall graph that has lots more types here, and we compile against that. And then give you compile time errors that you broke the integration actually, or you broke the contract between one of your graphs. And yeah, that gives you.
So as I understand it, so let me try and repeat back as a naive listener, as it were. I'm not a manager anymore, so I can't use that excuse. Anyway, pretend I'm a manager and I don't know anything. Sorry. What you're saying here is that you've composed this API, this gateway API, which people are using other by bringing in, creating other services underneath it. And you're saying that in that service, in one of those services you brought in, if you change something about the API that you've implemented there, something, and that's going to affect how it's being used somewhere else in the whole scheme of composability with other things, then that will flag up errors in your rider window there saying, or Visual Studio or whatever, saying, you've made a mistake because this won't work with some other code over there that you're not even really using, isn't loaded into your solution or anything. It's possibly not even written in .NET, right? I mean, it's and that's a pretty, I think that's a pretty compelling experience right there.
Yeah, it's, as I said, like all the parts are at the moment in preview, like Aspire in preview 4. There's Aspire preview 5 coming out. There's also like in preview 3 of Aspire, we had lots of bugs also with the orchestrator. But you can see it's coming together slowly.
Yeah.
And like in summer, this will all work really well together. And I think that the easiest way to build microservice setups and also like to have your front-end developers work with that is really by using Aspire and then putting GraphQL as a gateway in front of your services. And like we are working heavily to also not only have GraphQL downstream services, but also have like OpenAPI downstream services that compose actually into GraphQL. So no matter what you're using for your microservices, you can just compose them into our gateway, and we have this unified layer for your users. And I'm really disappointing. Like I did this demo like 20 minutes before. It was so beautiful.
We believe you. We believe you.
It always happens. It always happens. Yeah,
the demo gods are fickle. You know, you can't trust the demo gods.
I mean, I will say that I think it's great that we do these community stand-ups, and when you're preparing for a conference and you're pre-recording it and everything, you spend a lot of time making sure everything works. But one of the values of this community stand-ups is we have people on and it's very informal. And I think the trade-off there in terms of the amount of time we have to put into it and the value is definitely in favor of the value. But occasionally things don't go smoothly, right?
Yes, it's an early point in time to look at these things. It's like I can only encourage people to check it out. It's not something that is finished yet. Like, for instance, the Aspire Preview 3 to Preview 4 broke most of the contracts. Like the interface contracts were broken and things like that. But it's a good time to look at it. And like it's not so long until we reach summer. And then you can really play with these things in a proper work environment. And I think they will really make it much easier if you face this problem. If you don't have a microservice problem, like if you don't build these applications, you don't have to, right? Like Aspire doesn't mean you have to build suddenly these microservices. Only do it if you have the problem for them. But Aspire particularly helps you also if you just have one project because of all this nice telemetry.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so in the show description here, I'm wrapping up now. Is that, I assume that's good, right? So in the show description.
I'm just saying, maybe we have some questions. I haven't been following too closely. Maybe we want to do a quick
yeah, sure. So let me quickly bring up things. Yeah, for Michael, there was one back here. I haven't been doing good.
I'll say there have been a lot of questions about Aspire itself, and unfortunately, I mean, I'm definitely not an expert. I don't know to what extent Michael is an Aspire expert specifically, so we can't answer all the questions about Aspire, but definitely go and there's a repo for that, and there's specific Aspire demos and forums which you should absolutely go to and ask those questions to the real experts. We're just data people and a GraphQL expert here.
So that's a good one. Is security caching. So depends. Like header transformation, yes, you have that in the gateway. And the good thing, the gateway is just another .NET ASP.NET Core project. So we have the gateway just here, and ideally, you just create the gateway. Like if I go here, say new project, then you also have here a graphical gateway. Just you create it, and it's basically what I have here. But you have the ability to do header propagation and transformation. This is up to your personal needs. This is standard ASP.NET Core, so it's not what we came up with. It's basically what is standard stuff for ASP.NET Core, and we built on that. So we built on two components here, the HTTP client factory, and the client factory then ties into the service discovery and stuff like that. And we also have here header propagation, where you can rewrite headers and stuff like that. From a security standpoint, also you can use the standard ASP.NET Core security to do transport security, but we also have like authorization integration with ASP.NET Core or other providers like OPA, Open Policy Agent, and things like that. I hope that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good answer. Okay, so I've gone through and found any that seem, there's not that much that are not really just asking questions about how Spire works, which I talked about. Super cool to see here about real-time subscriptions change a lot in the near future.
Yeah, so real-time subscriptions we support like forever, but they just work in Aspire, like in Aspire with Fusion. If I just create a subscription in GraphQL, it will just integrate it in the gateway, and we handle all the real-time stuff. So also real-time works just out of the box. Something new that is coming is real-time over SignalR. So
nice.
while this is not a very popular thing in the JavaScript community, where GraphQL is the biggest, it is very popular with .NET people, and
yes.
we're gonna integrate it.
Yes.
So this is coming in version 14 as well. And actually, there's a ton of entity framework core stuff coming. I talked with Shay about a lot. We have a new paging API that integrates very nicely with entity framework. Maybe I can just...
We need to do another stand-up on paging again soon.
Paging
is so interesting.
Yeah, it's like there's tons of new stuff in that area. We have this new 2-page async here, which basically does key set pagination. And all you have to do is specify your query, then set your orders. And the order here is basically what we need for key set pagination. That's how it works. And we will then inspect. And I learned a lot about dark magic that the entity framework team is doing, like expression rewriters and stuff. So we basically inspect the query here and then generate key set pagination. That comes out of the box with Hot Chocolate 14. So there's also a lot of new stuff for EF Core coming.
We really want to push the envelope on our side as well, inside EF itself, with regards to pagination. Like we discussed exactly this kind of 2-page async API as well. But that's handling this with a cross database kind of thing, where different databases work differently is not always easy, and so on. Anyway, so that's a subject we think about a lot, and I hope we'll be able to do something in the next release.
Yeah, we are just here to bridge the gap until you guys figure it out.
So question here about whether I know you sent me some links that I'm going to put into the show links here. They're asking if that eShop demo with Hot Chocolate is available.
Not yet, because it's breaking and burning. It's basically, at the moment, it's our development thing. So we are trying everything out. At some point it will, but not yet. You saw how breakish it is at the moment. But let's go towards the release, and then we talk about it.
Okay, and then just a final couple of comments. Extremely easy to extend and customize, which is always great to hear. And It's also beautiful. Okay, thanks, Michael. Really great to have you on, as always, and I'm sure we will talk again. And I have no idea what we're doing in 2 weeks' time, but hopefully we'll be back with something. So we will see all of you guys then. Bye.
For tuning in.